I want to welcome Crowdsource the Truth viewers and our grand jury members to the third meeting of this grand jury, during which we are going to deliver an indictment against Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and James Biden. Larry, welcome back to the Citizens Grand Jury.
This is our fourth session. Take a break for about 10 minutes. I have an emergency call I've got to deal with, and I'll be right back if we can just hold for those 10 minutes.
Sure. Okay. No problem.
Right back.
Okay, so that's a little bit unconventional, but no problem. We can go over. Can everyone please mute their microphones? Unless Larry asks you to answer a question or something like that. A little bit unexpected for Larry to take that call, but obviously he's got a lot of pressing legal matters. We were talking the other day about the Supreme Court opinion that was issued in the case that Larry had brought on Laura Loomer's behalf. But today we're going to be talking about some of these recent interviews that Hunter Biden has been giving in support of his book. And he's made a lot of statements that have been going around in the news the past few days about his drug problems and some of the decision-making processes he's gone through in his life. We're going to be reviewing some of that video content. We're also going to finish the delivery of evidence regarding business activity in Ukraine and in China. And we're going to move on to another element of the indictment that Larry will present, which is the border crisis and everything that's going on with U.S. Customs and Border Protection. We've been hearing quite a lot about this, and I know that people are going to want to see the evidence that Larry has prepared. For people who are just joining us right now, Larry had a call that he had to take, but the Citizens Grand Jury will commence in just a few minutes when he returns. I want to remind people that they can support Larry's work and his staff at Freedom Watch by going to freedomwatchusa.org. This is a tax-exempt 501c3. Donations are tax deductible, and people who donate $50 or more to Freedom Watch get a copy of Larry's book, Forget the Scandal Industry, It Takes a Revolution. And that is a physical book, a paperback book that you will be sent. It's not an ebook. People had asked me about that. So it's very important. If you like what we're doing, and if you like what Larry and his team are doing at Freedom Watch, it's very important that you sponsor Freedom Watch, keep this sort of work going. Also want to let people know they can support this channel by going to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I just want to review again in a general sense the purpose of these citizens' grand juries and what we hope to achieve. Detractors of what we're doing, social engineers, people who don't want the public to support this, will say that citizens' grand juries like this don't have any teeth, don't have the ability to actually follow through on their indictments. But that's not true. People need to keep in mind Larry is a seasoned attorney, decades of experience, and the statements that are made and the decisions that are entered by the jury are going to be presented by Larry in the form of legal documentation to the authorities that are intended to enforce these judgments. And if they fail to do that, Larry's going to take the next legal step because, as he always says, we want a revolution, but not a violent revolution. We want a revolution utilizing the law. And I know a lot of people feel like that's not something that can be done. We haven't given up hope, and we are going to continue with these citizens' grand juries, continue assembling evidence, sworn affidavits. We're going to bring in additional witnesses in the future, and this is something that Larry wants to carry on. Don't forget, Larry's also planning a Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia in May. So people who are on the East Coast, we're going to have more information about that very soon. You'll be able to join us. And there will be more citizens' grand juries impaneled to hear evidence and to issue indictments against some of the rogues in our government who basically do whatever they want and never seem to meet justice. Now, there's a number of videos that Larry had asked me to play for the grand jurors. These videos are evidence that we will be reviewing today. And maybe what we should do is start with some of that while we're waiting for Larry. And he'll be back in just a moment. So the first... Maybe I hear him coming back into the room.
We're going to start with the videos.
Okay, what videos?
Okay, if everybody could please mute their microphones, it's going to be very important moving forward so that we don't interrupt the grand jury session. I just want to go ahead and play some material from this CBS interview that took place earlier this week. As I said, Hunter Biden has written a book called Beautiful Things, and let's give a listen to what he had to say on CBS. Perhaps if we could hear it, that might be easier for listening. Pardon me, everyone. Oops. Sorry. So it is always very challenging to put these remote on location video productions together. So many things that can go wrong on location here. Stand by. And have audio for everybody in just a moment. Okay, I think we're good to go here.
Hunter Biden, the son of President Joe Biden, has known no shortage of controversy in recent years, which means there was plenty to discuss when we sat down to chat not long ago.
You've said your dad always saw the good in you through all of this. Was there ever a time when you thought, okay, there's no way, he's going to give up on me, I've done it now?
Never, not once.
Hunter Biden is the president's second son, a Yale-trained lawyer and a lobbyist whose well-publicized drug problems, personal scandals, and business dealings seem to have kept him in the headlines for all the wrong reasons.
There's a current Department of Justice investigation into your finances.
Yep.
What is it about? Can you say anything more?
I can't, but I can say this, is I'm cooperating completely. And I am absolutely certain, 100% certain, that at the end of the investigation, that I will be cleared of any wrongdoing.
You're 100% certain
I'm
you'll be
100%
cleared.
certain of it. And all I can do is cooperate and trust in the process.
From the time he was a toddler, Hunter Biden and his older brother Beau were fixtures in Joe Biden's public life. And when they were both hurt in the 1972 car crash that killed their mother and sister, their dad, a newly elected U.S. senator, took his oath of office in a hospital room.
If in 6 months or so there's a conflict between my being a good father and being a good senator, which I hope will not occur, we can always get another senator, but they can't get another father.
But as the Biden sons got older, their paths diverged. Beau was a war veteran and Delaware Attorney General with his sights set on higher office. But Hunter, who was kicked out of the Navy Reserve after failing a drug test, grappled with substance abuse for years. And after Beau died of brain cancer in 2015, Hunter says he was binge drinking vodka so heavily that his father intervened.
He came to my apartment one time, and this is when he was still in office as vice president. And so he kind of ditched his Secret Service, figured out a way to get over to the house. And I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "Honey, what are you doing?" I said, "Dad, I'm fine." He said, "You're not fine."
He sought and got help in rehab. But in time, he fell off the wagon and deeper into the abyss.
You would wake up some mornings, I shouldn't even say some mornings because you slept for like 15 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
And be looking for crack and just smoke whatever was there?
Yeah, I spent more time on my hands and knees, picking through rugs, smoking anything that even remotely resembled crack cocaine. I probably smoked more Parmesan cheese than anyone that you know, I'm sure, Tracy.
Because there'd be crumbs mixed in and you just...
I mean, I went one time for 13 days without sleeping and smoking crack and drinking vodka exclusively throughout that entire time.
Hunter Biden's struggle with his personal demons is a big part of his new book, from an imprint of Simon & Schuster, a Viacom CBS company. The title, Beautiful Things, is a phrase he and his brother shared to remind each other of the good in life.
It was the last thing that he said to me.
Was
Beautiful things. And I held his hand, and he took his last breath.
Beau's death shook the entire Biden family, but the way Hunter dealt with his grief made headlines when he began dating his brother's widow.
after Beau died, you started a romantic relationship with Hallie, his widow.
Yep.
When the news of that broke, how did people look at you?
I think people were confused by it, and I understand that. I mean, I really do. To me, it's not something that is difficult to explain because it came out of a real overwhelming grief that we both shared. And we were together and trying to do the right thing. And that grief turned into a hope for a love that maybe could replace what we lost. And it didn't work. It didn't work.
I mean, you said you lost clients over this, you lost business over this.
Yeah,
You had
absolutely.
to step down from the World Food Program.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I made a lot of decisions that I probably shouldn't have made. There was a lot more compassion and understanding for the people that knew me, but it was a horrible time too.
And then there's this. In 2014, the younger Biden took a job on the board of a Ukrainian energy company, Burisma Holdings, at a time when his father, who was then vice president, had an active role in U.S. policy toward Ukraine. It raised eyebrows at the time, but by the 2020 elections, Hunter Biden was the center of a political firestorm.
Hunter got thrown out of the military. He was thrown out, dishonorably discharged.
That's not true. He
for
wasn't dishonorably.
cocaine use. And he didn't have a job until you became vice president. Once you
None of
became
that
vice
is
president,
true.
he made a fortune in Ukraine, in China, in Moscow,
That is simply
and various
not
other places.
true.
Looking back, did you make a mistake taking a spot on that board?
No, I don't think I made a mistake in taking the spot on the board. I think I made a mistake in terms of underestimating the way in which it would be used against me. And
But you must have seen the optics. Even back then, you must have, I mean, how could you not have foreseen that this was going to look bad?
because I really didn't. I'm being as honest with you as I possibly can. All I know is that not one investigative body, not one serious journalist has ever come to the conclusion that I did anything wrong or that my father did anything wrong.
But the rumors lived on. In October 2020, a New York Post article said that emails purportedly showing shady dealings in Ukraine by Hunter Biden were found on a laptop computer that he supposedly left in a Delaware repair shop in 2019. The details were sketchy at best. And last month, a declassified intelligence report said that before the election, the Russians had launched a smear campaign against Joe Biden and his family.
It does not specifically talk about your laptop.
Yeah.
Was that your laptop?
For real, I don't know.
I know, but you
my
know
point
that's
is,
this
I
is
really don't know.
Okay.
The answer is.
You
That's
don't
the
know
truthful
yes or
answer.
no if the laptop
I don't have
was
any
yours.
idea. I have no idea.
So
whether or
could
not.
have been yours.
Of course, certainly. There could be a laptop out there that was stolen from me. There could be that I was hacked. It could be that it was Russian intelligence. It could be that it was stolen from me.
And
don't
you
need the
didn't
laptop.
drop off a laptop to
No.
be repaired
No.
in Delaware?
Not
No.
that I remember at all. At all. So, we'll see. Usually he calls me right before he goes to bed just to tell me that he loves me.
Hunter Biden says he's rebuilding now and sober since he married South African film producer Melissa Cohen in May 2019. If his story means anything, he told us, it's that the only thing more powerful than a monstrous addiction or eviscerating grief is a family's love.
Did you say you and your dad talk every night?
Every night, yeah. Yeah, well, we talk at least every night, yeah.
Sometimes.
By the way, not only does he talk to me every night, he calls every one of my daughters, and he talks to each one of them every day. And he talks to me, and I know that he
the
talks to my sister.
President of the United States.
Yeah, yeah. But, by the way, he's always done that. I mean, always. He talks to each one of us. But I'll tell you why. Because he's lost. Because he, like me, knows what it's like not to be able to pick up the phone and talk to your son.
And he almost lost you.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. It's hard. I'm a Biden, we cry too much. Yeah. But, you know, I guess one of the reasons that I'm crying is because, you know, beautiful things. We're here. We're here.
Larry, you're back with us.
Well, I'm back.
And
I'm back, and my apologies for having to take that. But this is an ongoing process. I'll just address Hunter Biden's admissions in a few seconds. But here's what we'll be doing. This is our third Citizens Grand Jury session. We will have sessions every week, barring unforeseen circumstances. But I'll be here. And I hope everybody else can make it too. If you can't see our Citizens Grand Jury or a juror can't make it, you can go up on our website and see what went on. The first three sessions, we presented information and evidence with regard to this massive bribery scheme from Communist China, from Ukraine, from Russia. And we presented information contained in Peter Schweizer's very well-researched books, Secret Empire and Profiles in Corruption. We presented evidence from Senate reports and also letters written by then chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Charles Grassley. We presented, most importantly, the testimony of Tony Bobolinsky, who implicates Joe Biden himself in getting a 10% share, the 10% cut in the billions of dollars that were laundered by Hunter Biden from both Communist China and Burisma in the Ukraine and various oligarchs in Russia. So we have accomplished a great deal in what we have done so far. And what we're going to be doing today is closing the loop on a lot of this information. I have sent to all of you both grand jury instructions, citizens grand jury instructions, proposed indictments. I sent them to you this morning, and also verdict forms, which will make your findings in terms of issuing those indictments. I want you to review them among yourselves and to choose a jury foreman, a citizens grand jury foreman. That's the person who, will issue the indictment, will sign it on everybody's behalf if you decide that you have found probable cause on its various counts. We're going to facilitate your ability to communicate among yourselves in the next week, and to be able to do that by Zoom, confidentially. Grand jury generally meets confidentially when it comes to these kinds of deliberations. And next week, if you need further information, we will provide further information to you to issue one or more of the counts of the various indictments. And the indictments deal not just with bribery from China, Ukraine, and Russia, but also the reckless endangerment, which is a crime, and the sedition, which has been created at the southern border with regard to allowing a massive influx of illegal migrants, many of whom, and we're going to show you information about that today as well, are carrying a variant of COVID-19, which to this date, from everything that I see in the public domain, and probably you too, may not be covered even by so-called vaccines, which we don't even know if those vaccines work. But it's even less certain that they work with regard to these mutations of the virus, particularly since these vaccines, as we call them, many people believe they're not really vaccines, have really never been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. It's been rammed through, on a trial basis. It's basically just an experiment in many ways. We also know that in countries such as Israel, and we're going to present evidence next week about that as well, that some of these vaccines, the Pfizer vaccine, are alleged to have severely harmed, if not killed, a number of people. And we just don't know. So what's happening right now is extreme risk to the United States, to our well-being. And the President of the United States doesn't seem to care very much about it. So we are going to be presenting evidence seeking his indictment of reckless endangerment and, frankly, treason against this country. That will be presented as well. In terms you just saw, when you, as I gave you the jury instructions at the beginning, the citizens' grand jury instructions, as you have copies again now, is that when you listen to information or assess witnesses' testimony, and again, this is a citizens' grand jury, so all you need is probable cause, a mere suspicion to indict, to then create a condition upon which we will then try, we will then seek convictions, we will then sentence in a people's court and seek to mete out those sentences peacefully and legally. We actually have the right of citizens' arrest. I wrote that in my book. It takes a revolution to forget the scandal industry. We're not going to use force. We're not going to be physical. But by pure numbers of Americans that will demand justice, we hope that we will get that justice from law enforcement officials, if not the FBI, which is under the total control of Biden and Harris, and other law enforcement officials who will step in. That's what we will hope will happen. If not, the people will have to step in peacefully and legally. But what you just saw, if you look at the demeanor of Hunter Biden, when he was asked about that laptop and whether it was his eyes were shifting back and forth. He could not look the interviewer in the face, and he effectively admitted in any event that it was his. He did not deny it. And that buttresses the testimony of Tony Bobulinski, who says that he was in effect Hunter Biden's and James Biden's partner in these schemes, and he bailed out because he didn't want to be part of it. But that is very, very important. So that's extremely incriminating testimony coming from the horse's mouth of Hunter Biden. Now, there's an interesting phenomenon here which you need to take note of, is that why is Hunter Biden now coming out writing a book which is being widely published and widely purchased? It's reported that he got a large advance of several $1 million to do it. Well, why is it that he would come out now? And that is an easy question to answer if you've been doing what I've been doing now for 44 years as a lawyer, particularly in Washington and around Washington, D.C., the capital of corruption. On both sides of the aisle, I might add, Democrat and Republican. He feels like he's untouchable because his father controls the Justice Department. And the irony is that even if President Trump had controlled that Justice Department, nothing would have happened either. We've seen just over the last 4 years that no one at a high level has been held accountable for anything, whether it was Comey, whether it was McCabe, whether it was Clapper, whether it was Brennan, whether it was the Lovebirds, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, whether it was the Obamas, whether it was the Clintons, and that goes back before the Trump Justice Department, is that Republicans and Democrats scratch each other's backs, and they're not going to hold themselves accountable. Burn a lower level official and say you got the job done, a sacrificial lamb, like this lower level Justice Department lawyer that was indicted over the Steele dossier and the Russian collusion scandal. But then a leftist judge came along by the name of James Boasberg, who undoubtedly approved of the Russian collusion investigation. And he lets the guy off the hook with mere probation. No accountability. And he was a lower level anyway. This is the importance of the citizens' grand jury. This is why I'm so appreciative of what you're doing. Others are contacting us as well. I know there are people out there. I've been extremely busy. I apologize if I haven't gotten back to them, but we'll be including them in future citizens' grand jury sessions with regard to issues that are going to be going forward, because we're going to hold everybody accountable. And in the next session, next Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern and 8 a.m. Pacific, we will be presenting evidence about the bribery that Mitch McConnell has engaged in through his wife, Elaine Chao, with Communist China. Because the Republicans, maybe not at the scale of what you've seen with the Bidens in terms of McConnell, but still great scale, have done similar things. Selling influence in Washington is a way of life, and it permeates every aspect of this capital, which is in fact the capital of corruption. So that is why what you're doing is important, and why we're doing this each week, because it's going to keep going on and on and on. And we are your Justice Department. I'm your citizens prosecutor, citizens grand jury prosecutor. And if the American people don't clean out this rat's nest throughout this country, then we will have no country at all. And I think we're dangerously close to that right now. So that's very important. And then look at the crocodile tears of Hunter Biden, you know, how the leftist media gives him a vehicle to try to sympathize with his plight. Well, no sympathy is warranted, believe me. Jason's going to show you a picture, a video right now of President Biden, so-called President Biden, being asked a question by Peter Doocy of Fox News about whether he's spoken with the president of China over how COVID-19 came to be and how it was released. Watch the response. Look at the arrogance of this. And he just walks away. And ask yourself this question. Did he walk away because he's been bribed with hundreds of millions of dollars from communist China? I think that's a logical conclusion, because he's owned lock, stock, and barrel by the butchers of Beijing.
Stand by, Larry. Just a temporary problem with that. And have it ready in just a second. Okay, here we go.
American dead from COVID-19. A lot of families want to know how this happened, how it got here. Have you had a chance to speak to any of your international partners, any of President Xi, who I know you go way back with? Have you had a chance to ask him if these reports are true, that China maybe misled the world at the beginning?
No, I have not had that conversation with President Xi. Thank you.
That is the alleged president of the United States. And unbelievable, just walks off. You know, this is something that's been touted, over 500,000 people dead in this country. Everybody's being vaccinated. We don't even know if the vaccinations work, much more if they're harmful long-term to the American people. He hasn't had the time, after issuing 34 executive orders, to talk with the president of China. And why is that? Because his family have been bribed to the hilt. He is owned lock, stock, and barrel by the butchers of Beijing, who murdered 10,000 of their own people, mostly students, in 1991, when they simply walked through the streets of Beijing with a mock-up of the Statue of Liberty. This is who owns this president. It's perhaps the biggest crime ever committed in the history of this country. And that's why the Citizens Grand Jury is doing what our own Justice Department will not do. Now, let me read you a section of a book which I picked up this week. It's called Fallout: Nuclear Bribes, Russian Spies, and the Washington Lies That Enriched the Clinton and Biden Dynasties. Here it is, by John Solomon. Many of you have seen John, you know, on TV. He's one of the truly good people. He's one of the true people. I've known him a long time. He was editor of the Washington Times, Associated Press, even worked for the Washington Post. And he should be very well respected, but of course the left tries to trash him too. But he wrote this book, and it buttresses what Peter Schweizer wrote. In fact, Peter Schweizer wrote the foreword to the book. But I want to read you a portion just with regard to the Ukrainian bribery, because it wasn't just Chinese bribery. It was bribery coming from Ukraine, and Bob Alinsky testified to that as well, and Hunter Biden obviously greased that one as well, along with James Biden and others. So let me read this to you. This is on page 185, and we will be making this available to you in print as well, that you can then deliberate on throughout the week. Commercial deals, the Burisma connection. As Biden, he was then vice president, was flying to and from Kiev. Okay, that's the capital of Ukraine. Interestingly enough, that's where my claimant grandparents come from, in and around Ukraine and Odessa. Amid the maiden, they left, obviously, they fled the Bolsheviks. Amid the maiden revolution in early 2014, an oligarch who had founded one of Ukraine's largest natural gas companies, Burisma Holdings, got an idea. Perhaps Burisma, or even the oligarch himself, could curry favor with Obama or his vice president, that being Biden, by putting people close to them on the payroll, corruption by proxy. The oligarch, Mykola Zlochevsky, that's spelled Zlochevsky, had acquired his Burisma gas assets through suspicious or even criminal means. Furthermore, he had allegedly looted large sums of money from the company. Now, in April 2014, international investigators were hot on Zalewski's trail. By April 22nd, Burisma had tapped an American named Devin Archer. This is very important, a close associate of the Biden and Kerry families. We'll be seeking the indictment of John Kerry as well. Right now, we'll deal with Joe, Hunter, and James for the position of independent director. Archer and the Kerry families for the position of independent director. Archer and the vice president's son, Hunter, were close friends and business partners in an investment fund called Rosemont Seneca Partners. Archer had also worked on Secretary of State John Kerry's 2004 presidential campaign and was the roommate of Kerry's stepson, Chris Hines, while they studied at Yale. Financial statements obtained by the FBI and Ukrainian investigators reveal that exactly 1 week before Archer publicly joined Burisma as a director, Burisma began funneling substantial sums to bank accounts linked to Devin Archer and Hunter Biden. The very next day, April 16, 2014, Archer visited the Obama White House to meet directly with President Biden. And when you look at the book, when you read the book of John Sullivan, who truly is an expert, he backs everything up. It's very well footnoted with support. So I want you to look at that as well. Within a week, the vice president met with Ukrainian Prime Minister Yatsenyuk, Yatsenyuk, to discuss ways to eliminate reliance on Russian gas. Biden urged Ukraine to boost its energy production and said that an unspecified American team was currently in the region and that more teams are coming to support long-term improvements. The Ukrainian Prime Minister thanked Biden, parentheses, and the American taxpayers for their generous support. On April 28, 2014, the reason for Burisma's peculiar political hire of Archer began to make more sense. The Serious Fraud Office in the UK, that's the United Kingdom, froze certain assets belonging to Zlochevsky and Burisma, worth about $23 million. The UK authorities suspected that the money was transferred out of Ukraine fraudulently. Zlochevsky and Burisma have denied any wrongdoing, of course. On May 13th, 2014, less than 1 month after Archer was appointed and the first Burisma payments had entered US accounts, meaning Hunter Biden's accounts and his accounts, Burisma announced that Hunter Biden had officially joined his friend on the board. His bio on Burisma's website was deleted, but archives indicate that Biden may have quietly joined in April. Within 48 hours, Burisma's sizable twin payments began to flow to the Morgan Stanley account of Rosemont Seneca Bohai, B-O-H-A-I, Biden and Archer's firm. Secretary Kerry's stepson, Chris Hines, was clearly uncomfortable with his friend's Ukrainian arrangement. The same day that Burisma announced Hunter Biden had joined the board, Hines quickly put his concerns in writing to officials at his stepfather's agency. Quote, "I can't speak to why they decided to join Burisma," Eisman wrote his contacts at State, "but there was no investment by our firm in their company." Starting on May 15, 2014, two separate payments of $83,333.33 for a total of $166,666.66 landed in Biden and Archer's account. Like clockwork, Burisma's transfers continued for more than a year. And remember, Bob Belinsky testified that the big guy, Joe Biden, was getting 10% of this. While Secretary Kerry's stepson may have been uncomfortable with the Burisma arrangement, Kerry's press secretary, Jen Psaki, P-S-A-K-I, you've seen her on television, did not appear to have any issues with the appearance of Hunter Biden making big bucks from Kiev while his father oversaw Ukrainian policy. See the link? Biden's in charge of Ukrainian policy for Obama and his administration. Biden is lining his pockets from the Ukraine. Ukraine owns Biden as much as China owns Biden and his son and brother James. No, he's a private citizen, Psaki responded coolly at a routine State Department briefing on May 13th. The reporter pushed back, likening Hunter Biden's private citizenship to that of an oligarch. Quote, "No, there are not any concerns," Psaki said conclusively. Hear no evil, see no evil, do no evil. It's like the monkeys. Secretary Kerry's former chief of staff, David Leitner, Leiter, had no apparent qualms either. Less than a week after Hunter Biden joined the board, Burisma hired Leiter as their lobbyist. Burisma paid Leiter's firm $90,000 to lobby his former boss's department and Congress throughout 2014. Burisma also hired a Democrat-linked outfit named Blue Star Strategies to help the Ukrainian gas company shed its controversial image. Blue Star Strategies lobbyists dropped Hunter Biden's name in communications with the State Department and tried to leverage the son of the vice president to get meetings and burnish Burisma's image. Part of Hunter Biden's Burisma duties included advising the company on legal and corporate governance issues. While providing moonlight advice to Burisma, Biden also worked at the law firm Boies Schiller Flexner LLP. That's David Boies, who represented Al Gore in the 2000 election challenges in which I participated when I was chairman and general counsel of Judicial Watch in Tallahassee, Florida. When Archer asked Biden to recommend a law firm to counsel Burisma, presumably on their frozen assets dilemma, naturally Biden recommended his own firm. Burisma's first payment to Boies Schiller occurred on May 7th in the amount of $250,000. Burisma made another payment to the firm for $33,039.77 less than 5 months later. Burisma's payments to Boies Schiller apparently brought the Ukrainian gas company a report prepared by Nardello and Company, Nardello, that concluded Burisma was not under any international investigations. This conclusion proved to be false. This is very instructive of how things work in Washington, D.C. It's a complete enterprise between law firms, between lobbyists, between corrupt politicians that line their own pockets. And that is why I wrote my book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry, a large part of it, because the nation is so corrupt, it is controlled by these people. They're making money hand over fist. You saw what happened with the Russian collusion witch hunt with a law firm by the name of Perkins Coie, which is corrupt to the core, out of Seattle, that laundered money for Hillary Clinton to create that false Steele dossier, which triggered the Russian collusion investigation. And nothing happens to them either. They were sanctioned recently by a court, but that's hardly proper punishment. I've got them on many civil lawsuits that I have brought on behalf of people such as Chief Justice Roy Moore, Laura Loomer, and others. Let me continue reading, but this is the mechanism. This is the so-called mafia in Washington, D.C. that sells out the American people to enrich themselves. Next part of the chapter, the point man's point man. As a senior senator serving on the Foreign Relations Committee, Biden had been instrumental in creating a new special envoy position at the State Department to combat Putin's maneuvers against his neighbors. By the way, let me also add this. I want you to keep this in mind. John Solomon writes a very strong book, makes a lot of documented accusations and proof. So does Peter Schweitzer. Why don't the people that they have fingered, that they have implicated in crimes, sue them? Because they know that once they sue them, truth is an absolute defense, and that will give you discover more information with court process. So that's the other game that's being played here, that they commit these crimes, but they won't deny it, because if they do in court, they're going to open the door to finding out more information about what they've been doing. Continue reading. In 2007, Biden and his colleague, Senator Richard Lugar, wrote a letter to then Secretary Condoleezza Rice stating, Russia's attempt to consolidate its control over energy resources presents unacceptable security and economic risk to the United States. You see, there's a Russian component in all of this too, because Ukraine was being used as a foil against Russia at this time by the Obama administration. It's the way they could extract more from Ukraine with the threat of Putin in Russia. Cynical, but very effective in jingling the money change. When Secretary Clinton took over the State Department, the special envoy position that Senator Biden helped create in 2007 underwent significant changes. In October 2011, Clinton created a new Bureau of Energy Resources and appointed an ally named Amos Hochstein, Hochstein, to help develop the special energy position. Secretary Clinton tapped Hochstein as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy Diplomacy and created the Bureau of Energy Resources. I'm going to go down, but this is all part of a scheme. You're going to be able to read it to play off Russia against Ukraine, again, to jingle the money change for the Obamas, for Kerry, for large law firms, for all kinds of lobbyists. It's a very clever and criminal enterprise that is undertaken on a massive level, but it's done every single day in Washington, D.C., on a lower level as well. It's a way of doing business. It's why, frankly, I've advocated forming a new government and taking the government back to Philadelphia in the Independence Hall, just eliminating all this. Let the criminals in DC can commit crimes against themselves. I'm turning to page 193, and this is dealing with Biden and how he intervened to protect Hunter Biden from prosecution in Ukraine and Hunter Biden's associates. Firing the prosecutor, and he intervened while he was vice president, by the way. In December 2015, Vice President Biden was preparing for his next trip to Kiev. His aides were bracing for renewed scrutiny of Hunter's relationship with Burisma. Hochstein allegedly raised the Burisma issue with Biden, but did not recommend Hunter Biden step down from the board. No one wants to tell the main man to eliminate his son from corruption. On December 6, Biden departed for Ukraine in his capacity as Obama's point man. He had been sent to announce that there was another $1 billion guarantee. But en route to Kiev aboard Air Force Two, Biden had an idea. Biden's point man had previously asked the Ukrainian leadership to take action against a prosecutor that was investigating Burisma. When they failed to do so, Biden apparently decided to take matters into his own hands. But he would need to leverage the loan guarantee that he was scheduled to announce. You see, under Obama, they were given money to Ukraine, taxpayer money, big money. He would need, and the reason they did that, they wanted to be a thorn in the side of Russia and to own Ukraine. By owning Ukraine, they were able to shake it down for money. He would need to scrap that language from his upcoming speech, His aides did as they were instructed and edited the speech, removing any references to the billion-dollar loan guarantee. Biden's aides had been right to worry about the Burisma situation. On December 8th, 2 days after Biden and his delegation landed in Kiev, James Risen at the New York Times ran a blistering expose on the Hunter Biden-Burisma connection, stating that the credibility of the vice president's anti-corruption message may have been undermined by his son's connections to Burisma. Very charitable of Risen. Risen is a leftist, okay? So for him to write that was pretty strong, but he wants to obviously sell the New York Times newspapers, but he uses the word may. It's much more than may. Biden decided to hit two birds with one stone. He could deliver a strong anti-corruption message and eliminate the pesky prosecutor investigating Burisma. The latter could bolster the former, and it was a low-risk gamble. Prosecutor General Victor Shotkin, S-H-O-K-I-N, had become widely reviled by U.S. officials and media after he began investigating a Soros-funded Ukrainian NGO for diverting U.S. aid. After less than 10 months on the job, Shotkin had made enemies more powerful than his allies. You see, there's a George Soros connection in here too. And you'll see that as I read more of John's book here. Soros, as you might remember, is the ultra-leftist financier of most of the radical left, a Nazi collaborator with his father in World War II, who saved their own, quote, skin by confiscating the property of fellow Jews going to gas chambers and ovens. This is who basically finances the left. Tells you a lot about the left, more than a lot. Biden used the visit, his latest of what became approximately 12 trips to Kiev, to leverage the American aid money against Ukraine and extract concessions. Biden specifically leveraged the aid as a pressure tactic to force the firing of a prosecutor he did not like. In the wake of the revolution, Biden's message to Ukraine's parliament was simple, according to one aide. If you don't get your shit together, your country's doomed. That's a quote from Joe Biden. By December 2015, Biden's approach had hardly changed. As a Ukrainian parliamentarian put it, Biden's tone was like a big brother coming to tell the little brother what to do, a recommendation that you can't ignore. According to Biden's recollection, this is a quote from Biden, Joe Biden. I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko, P-O-R-O-S-H-E-N-K-O, and from Yatsenyuk, Y-A-T-S-E-N-Y-U-K, that they would take action against the state prosecutor. And they didn't. So they said they had. They were talking out to a press conference. I said, nah, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you billions of dollars. They said, you have no authority. You're not president. The president said, I said, call him. And then there was laughter. So Biden is shaking down, talk about quid pro quos and the first impeachment of President Trump. Here is the quid pro quo that Trump referred to and others referred to, the shakedown. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the billion. I'm going to be leaving here in. And I think it's about 6 hours. I looked at them and said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor is not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch, laughter. He got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time. Yeah, they put in place a patsy who let Hunter Biden and the rest of the Biden family and their associates off the hook. Again, ask yourself this question. I always like to say, ask that question. Trump Justice Department took no action. In fact, they let the president go down in flames in the 2020 election. Tells you something about both political parties. The establishments corrupt to the core, corrupt to the core. Republicans are meeting in Palm Beach this week, as I said, to figure out how they move on without Trump after having thrown him under the bus. It's more like a funeral in terms of what they're doing in Palm Beach because it's a dead party. It's over. It's corrupt. It's not as evil as the Democrats, but it's corrupt to the core. A not so solid prosecutor buries Burisma. The position of prosecutor general is the Ukrainian equivalent of the US Attorney General. It is a very powerful position, especially due to systematic corruption among the politically connected billionaire oligarch class. The prosecutor general has the ability to investigate and indict lawbreakers and effectively end or exonerate an oligarch's reign of corruption. In the tangled Obama-Ukraine saga, there are at least two prosecutor generals worth noting. Viktor Shotkin, the one Biden wanted fired, served from February 2015 to March 2016, and Yuri Lutsenko, Lutsenko, the one Biden called solid, and he was not even a lawyer. He served from May 2016 to August 2019, despite attempting to resign in November 2018. Poroshenko refused. The irony of Biden's recollection was that he claimed this unusual incident was an example of his efforts to prevent Ukraine from backsliding into a culture of corruption. Hochstein agreed and vehemently denied that Biden forced Shotkin's firing because the prosecutor was investigating Burisma and Hunter Biden. Many of us in the US government, this is a quote, believe that Shotkin was the one protecting Burisma founder Zlochevsky, Hochstein said. Apparently, Hochstein did not realize how ludicrous such an assertion sounds in retrospect. Was Hochstein really suggesting that Biden wanted his son's Ukrainian paymaster investigated? Was he actually suggesting that if Shotkin protected Burisma, then Biden would want him fired? Whether Shotkin was corrupt or not is of minimal importance given what happened next. In Biden's oft-quoted CFR video recollection, that's when he still had a memory, one piece is often overlooked. Biden claimed that Shotkin's replacement at the time was solid. The crucial afterthought is even more ironic. Shotkin's replacement was far from solid. The new prosecutor, Yuri Lutsenko, was a former Ukrainian minister with a checkered past, to put it mildly. In 2006, Lutsenko was removed from his post in parliament on charges of corruption. In 2008, he was accused of assaulting the mayor of Kiev. When drunk in an airport in 2009, Lutsenko was arrested by German authorities for making a scene. The same year, he lost a libel suit, he was known for disparaging his opponents, close paren. Shortly after Yanukovych, Yanukovych, took power in the Ukraine in February 2010, Lutsenko was charged with public corruption, charges he denied, and sentenced to 4 years in jail. Yanukovych pardoned Lutsenko in April 2013 and was released from prison. Soon after his release, and by November 2013, Lutsenko became one of the top organizers of the Maidan, M-A-I-D-A-N, protests. He was injured during a clash between protesters and riot police in January 2014. After the coup, Poroshenko appointed Lutsenko as a top advisor to the new pro-Western administration. He became the head of Poroshenko's bloc political party and held that position until late August 2015. As a Poroshenko loyalist with experience behind bars, Lutsenko knew the consequences of falling out of favor with the administration. Clearly, Poroshenko trusted Lutsenko. Euromaidan Press said that the close relationship, quote, casts a shadow, unquote, over Lutsenko's appointment because Lutsenko would be, quote, unlikely to take steps which contradict the president's views, unquote. It remains unclear why Biden deemed Lutsenko solid, but 6 months after Lutsenko's appointment, the Shotkin-era investigations into Burisma disappeared. How convenient. Of course, they were investigating Hunter Biden and his associates. After Trump saw Biden's explicit quid pro quo in video, he asked Ukraine to investigate the Burisma situation. Was Shotkin investigating Burisma when Biden demanded his ouster? Why would Biden say Shotkin's replacement, Lutsenko, was solid? Did it have something to do with the fact that Lutsenko quashed all Burisma investigations within months? The investigations of Hunter Biden and his associates? These are reasonable questions. Even one of Trump's most virulent critics, Congressman Adam Schiff, would acknowledge that Lutsenko was widely viewed to be corrupt. So there you have it. Citizens grand jurors. There you have it from a number of sources. There you have it from Peter Schweitzer, an excellent investigative journalist, from John Solomon, one as well, You have it from Senate reports. You have it from the testimony of Tony Bobolinsky himself, who they tried to enmesh in this massive bribery scheme. There is not just probable cause, but there's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And when you, and I will ask for this, to charge the various parties here, to indict them, we will go on to trial. And I will do my best to get a conviction in front of the People's Court. Now, we're also going to present some evidence right now, not just with regard to the bribery schemes from Ukraine, from China, from Russia, but also with regard to what's going on at the southern border. So I want you to consider this. We're going to break after that for today. We're going to go over with you, the various things that you'll need to consider during the next week to get ready to issue indictments that I'm requesting on behalf of the American people. And next week, when we reconvene at the same time, if you have any questions, if there's any evidence or information that you feel needs to fill in any of those questions, we'll be prepared to present it to you. So, Jason, if you will then now play some of these reports about what's been going on at the southern border. We played some of them last time as well in our second session and our first session. Matters seem to be getting worse and worse. So bad that Joe Biden apparently is now even discussing filling in the holes in the border wall because he knows that he's in great jeopardy, not just with regard politically, but he's in legal jeopardy as well, and certainly is in this grand jury.
Larry, the first video we want to share was just recently released. It depicts a young boy being met by a Border Patrol officer. If people haven't seen this yet, here it is.
¿Ah?
¿Me puede ayudar?
¿Qué pasó?
Es que yo venía con un grupo de personas y me dejaron botar y no sé dónde están.
No sé dónde están. ¿Te dejaron solo?
Pues claro, me dejaron
Jason, we don't
botar.
see the
¿Te
video.
dejaron
It's not
solo
coming up.
botado?
Solo.
¿No vienes con mami o con papi o con alguien?
¿Ah?
¿Vienes con tu mamá o tu papá?
Nadie.
Let's,
Yo venía en un
try to
grupo
replay
que
it over
venía de
again.
entrega con
Hang on.
usted y al final me dejaron botar y venía aquí a pedir auxilio.
¿Te dejaron botado y te dijeron que vinieras a pedir auxilio?
No, yo vengo porque si no, ¿por dónde me voy a ir? Allí voy a dejar y tal vez me pueden robar, secuestrar o algo.
Te pueden
Tengo
robar.
miedo.
¿Tienes miedo? Ok.
Sí.
Ahorita hablamos, ¿ok?
Okay, sorry about that. I think it should be back now. We'll try it again.
¿Ah?
¿Me puede ayudar?
¿Qué pasó?
Es que yo venía con un grupo de personas y me dejaron botar y no sé dónde están.
No sé dónde están. ¿Te dejaron solo?
Pues claro, me dejaron botar.
¿Te dejaron solo botado?
Solo.
¿No vienes con mami o con papi o con alguien?
¿Ah?
¿Vienes con tu mamá o tu papá?
Nadie. Yo venía en un grupo que venía de entrega con usted y al final me dejaron botar y venía aquí a pedir auxilio.
¿Te dejaron botado y te dijeron que vinieras a pedir auxilio?
No, yo vengo porque si no, ¿por dónde me voy a ir? Allí voy a dejar y tal vez me pueden robar, secuestrar o algo.
Te pueden
Tengo
robar.
miedo.
¿Tienes miedo? Ok. Ahorita hablamos, ¿ok?
And then, Larry, we've
Really
also
sad.
got, sorry?
I said very sad, yes.
Yeah, we've also got a number of articles that you've shared that address this very matter. Here we go.
Can you read that article, Jason, for the Citizens Grand
Yes,
Jury?
this is telling us that more than 250 migrant kids and teens have tested positive for COVID-19 in Texas shelters. This is coming to us from Houston Public Media, funded by PBS and NPR. Texas Health and Human Services confirmed 261 COVID-19 cases in state-licensed facilities and foster care for migrant children since March 5th, 2021. This tells us that more than 250 kids and teens held in Texas federal migrant shelters have now tested positive for COVID-19, according to Texas Health and Human Services data, a situation that has made it more difficult to safely and quickly process minors arriving in the U.S.-Mexico border without a guardian. At least 37 of the 44 facilities licensed by the state of Texas to care for migrant children have reported COVID-19 cases in the last 2 weeks, impacting 258 kids and teenagers in shelters overseen by both Texas Health and Human Services and the Federal Office of Refugee Resettlement. An additional 3 migrants tested positive in state-licensed foster care. COVID-19 has already contributed to the need to open new temporary shelters to hold unaccompanied minors in Dallas, Carrizo Springs, Midland, and Pecos. The federal government is now scouting additional locations in Texas, including sites on military bases in Lackland and Fort Bliss, according to the Pentagon. Last week, the Associated Press reported more than 50 migrant children tested positive for the disease in the temporary Midland shelter, and 1 child had to be hospitalized. Federal officials have been overwhelmed by a seasonal uptick in migrant teens arriving at the border, and shelter capacity has been limited due to COVID-19 safety protocols. The permanent migrant shelters and foster homes scattered across Texas are licensed to hold up to 7,696 teens. Only about half of that shelter space is accounted for, according to state health officials. In a statement, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which oversees the care of migrant teens and their unification with family members, said it has worked to build up its licensed bed capacity and currently funds over 13,450 licensed beds, the highest in the program's history. The COVID-19 pandemic has created conditions that have limited placement of at ORR's licensed shelter facilities. After staying in shelters, the vast majority of these children who arrived at the border without a guardian will be placed with family members living inside the United States. In late January, the average length of stay in these facilities before being united with family was 42 days, which attorney and Project Lifeline Executive Director Hope Fry said is already too long. These kids could be united with families within 10 days, Fry said. Government processes need to be well managed and expeditiously handled, Fry said. Fry, who had made several visits to both children and family detention centers, said she expects that because of the influx in kids, wait times at shelters are likely longer than 42 days. Any place where you have large congregate care settings for children are traumatic, unhealthy, and abusive, Fry said. You cannot put children in large settings and expect to care for them properly. These are children who are traumatized at home. They're traumatized in their journey. And that's contributed by Maria Mendez.
Okay. It's also been widely reported, and we'll present that to you as well next week, that they are carrying variants, mutations of COVID-19. That's what I was talking about. And now many of them are into the hinterland or into the center part of the United States. A huge risk to our health and welfare. So at this point, we're going to conclude the information for today. We have another article?
We do. This is from the Dallas Morning News. Yeah, this is telling us that immigrant children in federal care haven't escaped COVID-19 infection. There have been almost 2,900 lab-confirmed coronavirus cases among unaccompanied immigrant minors taken in custody after crossing the border in the past year, according to federal data released to the Dallas Morning News. This is from March 24th, just 2 weeks ago. There have been almost 2,900 lab-confirmed COVID-19 cases among unaccompanied immigrant minors taken in custody after crossing the border in the past year, according to federal data released to the Dallas Morning News. About 1,900 of these cases were in Texas. Some unaccompanied teen boys have also tested positive after they arrived at temporary child migrant shelter at Dallas K. Bailey's Hutchinson Convention Center. They were quarantined, said a spokesman for Health and Human Services, the agency now caring for the children. HHS wouldn't disclose the number of cases found at the shelter, but Representative Beth Van Dune, a Republican from Dallas, said there were 22 children who had tested positive and been quarantined. Van Dune toured the facility Tuesday. The convention center is being used as temporary housing to relieve overcrowding at Border Patrol locations and has quickly become the largest such emergency shelter for immigrant youth in the nation. About 2,000 teen boys are now sheltered there, arriving in steady numbers since Wednesday of last week. There are now 11,300 unaccompanied migrant teens and children in HHS care. That number fluctuates because children are generally reunited with their parents or a relative on average within 4 to 5 weeks. About 80% of the unaccompanied children are reunited with a parent or relative in the United States, officials have said. The number of COVID-19 cases among detained immigrant children comes as Republican Governor Greg Abbott has criticized the administration of President Joe Biden for importing the coronavirus into the state and for having what he says are lax policies that led to the sharp rise in unaccompanied migrant minors. What COVID variants have they been exposed to? Asked the governor at a news conference in Dallas last week. They're coming through Mexico, which is considered to be one of the hottest hotspots for COVID in the world. Van Dien praised HHS, the American Red Cross, and FEMA for pulling together the emergency site in just days. But she also took aim at the Biden administration this week, saying Biden's dangerous rhetoric and reckless neglect of our nation's laws have created a very real crisis at the border. Since March 2020, when the coronavirus pandemic was officially declared, about 60,000 unaccompanied minors have been taken into custody by the U.S. Border Patrol, according to their statistics. This March, with Border Patrol stations overwhelmed in the Rio Grande Valley, numbers are expected to hit new record levels and exceed the 12,000 high of May 2019. With 2,900 children and teens testing positive for COVID-19 out of about 39,000 viral tests since late last March until this week, the positivity rate among migrant children is about 7.4%. In mid-March, Robert Fenton, the acting administrator of FEMA, told a House Subcommittee on Homeland Security that less than 6% of all migrants tested at the border were positive. But the overall positivity rate for the general population in Texas during the same time frame was far higher at 13%, according to Johns Hopkins University. Of the nearly 2,900 minors whose lab results showed they were COVID positive. About 2,600 have recovered and moved from out of isolation, HHS data shows. Among staff, there were about 1,470 self-reports of positive COVID-19 tests among personnel associated with the Office of Refugee Resettlement, a unit within HHS that handles unaccompanied migrants. HHS has repeatedly stressed that the immigrant children are given rapid tests before they arrive from the border. All children are tested for COVID-19 before being transported to the Dallas shelter. Mark Weber, a spokesman for HHS, said in an email, "The children are again COVID-19 tested upon arrival and then subsequently every 3 days. All children were screened under CDC guidelines for preventing and controlling communicable diseases," Weber said, "and CDC is on-site monitoring the operation. If a child tests positive after arrival, they are removed from the remaining population and are isolated for the welfare of the staff and others." Cases of COVID-19 were expected, and HHS and other agencies are prepared for it, Weber said. Children who test positive are placed in a facility off-site for the welfare of the child, staff, and others, Weber said in an email. It's unclear where the children become infected, a highly politicized point. Some children have been in Border Patrol custody for 10 days before they're transferred to emergency sites, NPR and others have reported. The first 200 youths arrived in Dallas on March 17th. It was inevitable, said Dallas attorney Irene Mugambi, who volunteers at the convention center and is a regional leader in the American Immigration Lawyers Association. "We are in a global pandemic. It is still bad." But Mugambi said the lower positivity rates among the immigrant children show that the spread of infection is contained. These healthcare concerns get used to oppose immigration. All right, said Bill Holston, a lawyer who heads the Human Rights Initiative of North Texas. "It is true that COVID is a terrible problem in our country, but it shouldn't be used as cover to deny people their legal rights and to get into this country. Some of Holston's staff are volunteering at the emergency center, and he has applied to volunteer as well. Other sites are opening or already have opened at the San Diego Convention Center, in Pecos, in Midland, and Carrizo Springs," HHS said. Meanwhile, more children are expected to arrive at the Dallas Convention Center, which HHS says has capacity for 2,300 in the section they leased. "No teen boys in Dallas have yet been reunited with families," said Mugambi, who is also regional leader in the American Immigration Lawyers Association. "They are okay, it's just not home. Once they start seeing reunifications happening, it's going to be such a happy moment."
Well, yeah, there you have it, okay? They're flooding into this country. They've got COVID-19. What about the humanitarian issues with regard to our own people? So we're going to conclude this for today in terms of the information and evidence that we're providing. We will be communicating with you to facilitate your getting the book excerpts that I read, other materials. We're going to set up a mechanism that you can communicate with each other. You can review the documents that I sent to you this morning. I think there's one document that is difficult to open, so we'll resend that later today. They are the jury instructions. They are the indictments that are proposed. We can certainly modify those indictments as the grand jury sees fit. If you need additional information, we will provide it in the next session, and you can communicate directly with me. You've got my email address, you've got Jason's email address, and you are to deliberate throughout the week. So we'll get into a position where next week we will be able to ask the foreman to sign off on the indictments, and then we can move on to indicting others such as Mitch McConnell and the rest of the Biden family, and you name it, as I set forth. And then we will be establishing mechanisms to formulate citizens courts to try these people. I will be the prosecutor. We will get someone to sit in the role of a judge. We will pick a petit jury. We will inform by giving them copies of the indictments, Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and James Biden, as well, on the various matters that we've been meeting on as well. They'll have an opportunity to come in and defend themselves. They can hire lawyers. Maybe they can get David Boies to do it, or Hunter himself. That would be interesting, wouldn't it? Hunter's allegedly a lawyer, although I'm sure he's been disbarred by now. But in any event, not that that means much of anything, but it's a very interesting situation that we deal with today. The country is in crisis, and without a justice system, it's only going to get worse. So that's why what you're doing is very important. I want to thank you again for your patriotism, for your courage, and like our founding fathers, risking your lives and other people's lives to form a free nation, because right now it's not free. Right now we are living under a dictatorship. Thank you. I'll see you next week, and we will communicate in the next day or so. God bless.
And very briefly, Larry, before we end the broadcast, I want to remind everyone to visit freedomwatchusa.org. We could not be conducting these citizens' grand juries without Larry and his team at Freedom Watch. Donations to Freedom Watch are tax deductible, and anyone who donates $50 or more will receive a gift copy of Larry's book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. And this is a physical copy of the book that will be mailed to you. It's not an e-book, it's not a Kindle, it's the actual book. I also want to remind people that you can support this show by going to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And I want people to keep in mind that we wouldn't be able to do something like this on CNN or Fox News or any corporate sponsored entity. We can't bring you this kind of information without your support and sponsorship. So click the like button, share this video, email it to friends and family, and make sure as many people see this as possible. Thank you for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you for another Citizens Grand Jury next week. Have a great day.
God bless you all.